3 years ago, I drove to a nursery and spent $60 on bags of fertilizer, compost amendments, and a bottle of liquid feed. I carried it all home, worked it into my beds, watered everything in, and waited. My plants grew, but something about them felt hollow. Thin leaves, pale color, tomatoes that cracked before they ripened. I kept adding more inputs, spending more money, assuming the answer was always the next product on the shelf. My neighbor had a different story. She grew on the same street, same neighborhood, same basic soil type. No fertilizer bags. No liquid feed. No monthly trips to the nursery. Her beds were darker, looser, and alive with activity. Her tomatoes were heavy and uncracked. Her garlic bulbs were the size of my fist. And every season, without any inputs at all, her garden grew better than mine. Here is my confession. I spent 3 full growing seasons believing that feeding plants was about what I added to the soil. Bags, bottles, and amendments. The more I added, the more I depended on adding more. I had no idea I was solving the wrong problem entirely. Because when I finally asked her what she was putting into the ground, she looked at me like the answer was obvious. Nothing. She told me she had stopped feeding the soil altogether and started feeding something else. And when she described what she meant, I recognized it immediately as something farmers had understood for thousands of years before the first fertilizer bag was ever manufactured. Welcome to Garden for Profit. In this video, I am going to show you exactly why everything modern gardening teaches you about soil fertility is running in reverse. What ancient farmers understood that we have systematically unlearned. And how to rebuild a soil system that feeds itself permanently with zero inputs from you. Stay with me to the end because the method that finally changed my results is simpler than anything you have bought, and it starts underground in a place most gardeners have never thought to look. Let me show you exactly what most gardeners are doing every single season. And I mean exactly. You test your soil, or maybe you skip the test and guess. You buy a bag of fertilizer, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium on the label, and you work it into your beds. You add a bag of compost from the garden center. Maybe a bottle of liquid feed for your heavy feeders. You plant. Things grow. But by midsummer, something starts to decline. Leaves yellow. Growth slows. So you add more. And next season, you do the entire cycle again. Slightly more of everything than the year before. Every single season, you are managing a deficit. That is the system failure. Not your technique. Not your seed selection. Not your watering schedule. The system itself is broken at the foundation, and here is the name for what you are actually doing. You are running a fertility extraction operation and calling it a garden. Every time a crop grows in your soil, it draws minerals, biology, and structure out of the ground. When you harvest that crop and carry it out of the garden, those resources leave with it. They do not come back on their own. So the next season, the soil starts slightly more depleted than it was the year before. You compensate with inputs. The inputs feed the plant, but they do not rebuild what the soil actually lost. Biology stays broken. The mineral cycle stays open. And your dependence on the bag, the bottle, and the garden center grows quietly year after year, without you ever noticing the direction you are traveling. This is not a personal failure. This is what the entire modern gardening system was designed to produce. A gardener who buys inputs indefinitely because the underlying soil system never actually recovers. And here is what makes it worse. The inputs themselves often accelerate the problem. Synthetic nitrogen pushes rapid plant growth, but it does almost nothing to restore the microbial population that makes minerals available in the first place. You get a green plant on dead ground. You solve the visual problem while the structural problem goes deeper. Ancient farmers had a completely different diagnosis for soil that stopped producing. And their solution had nothing to do with what they added. It had everything to do with what they stopped doing. Walk into an old-growth forest. Not a managed one. A wild one that has never been touched by a human hand. Look at the trees. Enormous. Dense. Loaded with life at every layer. Now ask yourself one question. Who fertilized this? Nobody. Not once. Ever. That forest has been producing at full capacity for centuries, in some cases for thousands of years, without a single bag of nitrogen, without a pH amendment, without a liquid feed application. It does not deplete. It does not require intervention. It does not run a deficit. Every season it grows more complex, more productive, and more resilient than the season before. This is what ancient farmers observed. Not in a textbook, not in a laboratory. They walked into wild land, watched what happened there without human interference, and asked a simple question that modern gardening has almost completely stopped asking. What is the forest doing that we are not? The answer was not a nutrient. It was a relationship. The forest floor is not just decomposing matter sitting on top of dirt. It is an active, layered biological system where death feeds life, where roots communicate through fungal networks, where minerals are unlocked not by being poured in from outside, but by being cycled endlessly from within. Ancient farmers from China, from Mesoamerica, from West Africa, from the farming cultures of the ancient Near East, they did not manage soil like a bank account they were constantly withdrawing from. They managed it like a living system they were in partnership with. They were not adding fertility to their soil. They were building the conditions for the soil to generate fertility on its own. That distinction is everything. And it starts with a mechanism most gardeners have never heard named. It is called the soil food web. And here is what it does. Every cubic inch of healthy, undisturbed soil contains billions of bacteria, fungi, protozoa, and nematodes existing in a precise predator-prey relationship. Bacteria consume organic matter and lock nutrients inside their bodies. Protozoa eat the bacteria and release those nutrients directly into the root zone in plant-available form. Fungi extend plant root systems by hundreds of times their natural reach, mining minerals from deep in the ground that roots could never access alone. The plant does not need you to feed it. It needs this system intact. That is the entire mechanism. This is not a new discovery. It is a rediscovery of something that sustained civilizations for thousands of years before the first synthetic fertilizer was ever manufactured. The most documented example is China. For 4,000 years, Chinese farmers cultivated the same land continuously without depleting it, not rotating it out, not leaving it fallow for decades. The same fields, generation after generation, producing full harvests without collapse. When American agronomist F. H. King traveled through China, Korea, and Japan in 1909 to study their farming systems, he was expecting to find exhausted, degraded soil. What he found was the opposite. Deep, black, biologically active earth that had been farmed continuously longer than most Western civilizations had existed. He published his findings in a book called Farmers of 40 Centuries. The title was not an exaggeration. It was a precise description of what he witnessed. What were they doing? They were closing every loop. Crop residues went back to the soil. Human and animal waste was composted and returned to the fields. Waterways were managed to recapture nutrients before they escaped. Nothing left the system permanently. The soil food web was never starved because the organic matter that feeds it was never removed. Fertility was not something they added from outside. It was something the system continuously regenerated from within. Move to Mesoamerica. The Maya and Aztec farming systems built raised bed networks called chinampas in shallow lake beds, layering aquatic vegetation, lake sediment, and organic matter into platforms of extraordinary biological density. Chinampa soil did not need to be fertilized because the layering process itself recreated the conditions of the forest floor that the soil food web requires to function. Some of these systems fed populations of hundreds of thousands of people from land areas that modern agronomists still struggle to match in productivity per square foot. In West Africa, traditional farmers practiced what researchers now recognize as one of the earliest forms of deliberate soil biological management. Specific crop combinations were selected not just for what they produced above ground, but for what their root systems contributed below it. Nitrogen-fixing trees were intercropped with food crops across wide areas, feeding the soil biology that fed everything else. This was not guesswork. It was accumulated observational knowledge passed across generations, refined over centuries into a system that maintained productivity without external inputs. None of these civilizations had access to synthetic fertilizer. None of them had soil testing kits or pH meters or bags of amendments from a garden center. What they had was an understanding that the soil was not a growing medium to be managed. It was a living system to be maintained. And the way you maintained it was not by adding things from outside. It was by never breaking the biological cycle that made fertility self-generating in the first place. They were not ahead of their time. We fell behind theirs. Here is what is actually happening underground that most gardeners never see. It is called the mycorrhizal network. And it changes everything you think you know about how plants feed. Mycorrhizal fungi attach to plant roots and extend outward into the surrounding soil in threads so fine they penetrate spaces no root could ever reach. In exchange for sugars the plant produces through photosynthesis, the fungi deliver water, phosphorus, zinc, copper, and other minerals directly into the root system. This is not a passive process. It is an active biological trade. The plant and the fungus are in a negotiated exchange that has been operating for an estimated 450 million years. Here is the critical detail. Synthetic fertilizers, particularly synthetic phosphorus, switch this exchange off entirely. When phosphorus is freely available from an outside source, the plant stops investing in the fungal relationship. You feed the plant. You starve the network. And the network is the whole system. Here is the part nobody talks about. The soil does not need more nutrition. It needs less interference. Every time you till deeply, you shatter the fungal networks that took seasons to establish. Every time you apply synthetic fertilizer, you signal the plant to abandon the biological relationships it depends on for long-term mineral access. Every time you remove organic matter from the surface of your beds, you starve the bacteria at the base of the entire food web. You are not neglecting your soil by doing less. You are protecting it. The most productive thing you can do for a depleted garden is to stop. Stop tilling. Stop synthetic feeding. Stop removing. Start returning organic matter to the surface and leave it there. Let the system rebuild the relationships that were there before you disrupted them. Ancient farmers did not have better soil than you. They simply never broke what was already working. So here is exactly how you apply this. Not in theory. In your garden this season with what you already have. Step 1. Stop tilling. If you are currently digging your beds over completely each season, stop. Deep tillage destroys fungal networks, collapses soil structure, and brings weed seeds to the surface. Instead, use a broad fork if compaction is a genuine problem. A broad fork lifts and aerates without inverting. It opens the soil without shattering the biology living inside it. If your beds are already loose and productive, do not touch them at all. The best thing you can do for an established bed is leave the structure beneath the surface completely undisturbed. Step 2. Cover the surface. Bare soil is not neutral. It is actively degrading. UV exposure kills surface biology. Rain compacts the top layer and creates a crust that blocks gas exchange. Temperature swings stress the microbial population. Cover every bed with a layer of organic mulch, straw, wood chips, dried leaves, or grass clippings, at a depth of 2 to 4 inches. This single action insulates the soil food web, retains moisture, moderates temperature, and as the mulch breaks down slowly from the bottom, it feeds the bacteria and fungi at the foundation of the entire system. This is the forest floor you are recreating. It costs nothing if you have access to any organic material at all. Step 3. Return what you remove. Every crop residue that leaves your garden takes biology with it. Roots, stems, leaves, spent plants. Chop them and drop them onto the surface of the bed rather than removing them. If you are harvesting fruit or root crops, the above-ground residue can go straight back as surface mulch. You are not creating disease risk by doing this. You are closing the nutrient loop that ancient farmers understood as non-negotiable. What grew from the soil returns to the soil. Step 4. Introduce compost once, correctly. This is not a contradiction of everything above. Compost is not a fertilizer. It is a biological inoculant. A thin layer of finished compost, 1 inch, applied once at the start of the season, introduces a diverse microbial population into your bed and gives the soil food web a foundation to rebuild from. After that, your mulch layer and your returned crop residues feed the system forward. You are not creating a dependency. You are starting a cycle that sustains itself. Step 5. Plant continuously. Bare soil has no living roots feeding sugars to the fungal network. Keep something growing in every bed at every point in the season. Succession plant. Use cover crops in the gap between harvests. The mycorrhizal network requires a continuous supply of plant-produced sugars to stay active. An empty bed is a network in starvation. These 5 steps cost almost nothing. They require no products, no amendments, no monthly purchases. They simply require you to stop doing what was breaking the system in the first place. Here is the reality nobody talks about. This system takes time, and I will not pretend otherwise. If your soil has been conventionally managed for years, tilled every season, fed synthetically, stripped of organic matter, the biology is not going to recover in 4 weeks. The fungal networks need time to reestablish. The microbial population needs seasons to rebuild its density and diversity. Your first year of transitioning may not look dramatically different from your last year of doing things the old way. Some beds may actually look worse before they look better as the system recalibrates. This is not failure. This is repair. The reason most gardeners abandon this approach before it works is that they are measuring the wrong thing. They are looking for the immediate green flush that synthetic nitrogen produces and calling its absence a problem. But that flush is borrowed. It does not build anything. It simply spends what little biological capital remains and leaves the account emptier than before. What you are building instead is compounding. A soil food web that grows more complex and more productive every single season without additional investment from you. By year 2, you will notice the difference in your soil texture. By year 3, you will notice it in your yields. By year 5, you will not recognize the ground you started with. Ancient farmers did not farm for 1 season. They farmed for generations. Build accordingly. If this changed the way you think about your soil, hit subscribe. Every video on this channel is built around the same principle. Growing more by understanding more with less dependence on what you buy. Now I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me. Are you team stop tilling or team start mulching? Which one are you implementing in your garden first? I will see you in the next video.